Hi, this is Sierra Dahl. Welcome to the Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life podcast with Dr. Barry Weinhold. Dr. Barry is living proof that it's possible to overcome a traumatic childhood and move forward and have a successful, happy, and self-aware life. As a result of his experiences, he's devoted the past 45 years as a therapist, university professor, and author of over 80 books to develop cutting-edge approaches that can show you how to achieve the life that you want. We'd like to hear from you. So send us your stories and your questions, and Dr. Barry may feature you on a future podcast. If you subscribe to the podcast, you'll receive a free self-assessment tool that will help you evaluate how you might be able to move your life forward more effectively. Now here's Dr. Barry. So Dr. Barry, it looks like today we're talking about people pleasing. I am pretty sure most people can identify with that problem, including myself. So go ahead
and myself.
Yes.
Right, definitely. So how's people pleasing show up in your life?
Wow, that's a good question. Okay, so as a woman, I tend to probably didn't have enough self-esteem years ago, for sure. It wasn't a problem, probably, but it is fact that I felt like if I asked for what I wanted, or if I was revealing myself to be my true self, that people wouldn't like me.
Yeah.
And they would reject me. So I tend to not want to have conflicts. And then it would build up into this volcano after a while, because I wasn't really asking for what I wanted, and all of a sudden I would explode, and that wasn't a very good way to go through relationships.
No.
So I've learned to not do that and to be more open and honest and ask for what I want, so that I'm not getting upset about things that aren't working. So,
yeah,
what do you think?
Well, I grew up people pleasing in my family. I kind of was taking care of a mother who was dysfunctional at times, and also trying to make sure that I didn't do or say anything that didn't activate her mental problems, which she was borderline. And when borderlines get into a borderline episode, they tend to find the person nearest them to blame everything on. And so I was the whipping boy very often growing up. Things were blamed on me, and I couldn't figure out why I was blamed for things that I certainly didn't do. And so that was again how I grew up with becoming a people pleaser. And I think there was a lot of fear of rejection as well, that if I really was who I am, people just don't like me. And there must be something wrong with me. That's the other thing that comes with it, is that people act this way. I mean, in terms of trying to please other people, because they think there's something wrong with them, and that other people are going to find out what's wrong with them, and then they'll be rejected. So it's deeper than just a social rejection. It's a fear of somehow you psychologically you are rejected and seen as less than, or not important, or not to be somebody to spend time with.
Thinking back on it, I think one of the reasons I became a people pleaser was my parents. And a lot of that had to do, I didn't want to do anything that would hurt their feelings, because they were very loving towards me, and I had a wonderful parents, but I didn't want to upset them by doing something that they would think was something I was a bad person doing. So I was always doing pretty much what they wanted. And you're right, I'm afraid of just making things worse by saying what I wanted and causing any kind of problems or agitation at all.
Well, when I was 5 years old, my grandmother pulled me aside, my mother's mother, and she said, "You're about ready to enter school, and I want you to be a good boy in school and not get into any problems, any trouble. In fact, for every A on your your report card for deportment, which is what they usually, if you're following the rules and everything, they'd give you an A. And for every A that you get on your report card, I'll give you a dime.
Okay,
In
you got bribed.
I wonder what inflation would make that worth now. But anyway, the reason she said, now you need to do this because your parents have enough problems of their own. So please don't cause them anymore. So there was the beginning of people pleasing.
Yeah,
I had been given instructions by my grandmother that my parents were in such a state mentally that I had to do whatever I could to help them and please them. And so that was really a difficult thing in my marriage relationships. I was tended to be more of a people pleaser, more of an accommodator, I guess is what the term I used. I accommodated to the needs of others more than I did to pay attention to my own needs. And I would say, well, oh, well, if that's the way they think about it, they must be right. I must be wrong. I must not know what it's all about. They must know better than I do. So I'll just go along with them.
well, I
And
can relate to that as well. You just, not that they were particularly right, but just that I didn't want conflict.
right,
And I didn't want to
avoiding.
ask, and I didn't want to be rejected. So if I asked for what I wanted, they might say no, and that was kind of a rejection. So
Yeah.
why bother asking?
Well, I had a very interesting session with a client earlier this past week. I gave him the people pleaser self quiz, which will be available to anyone who wants to subscribe to the website or to the podcast, and we will send you a copy of it. It's in 30 questions about what, and from that you'll be able to determine how much of a people pleaser you are actually. I mean, there's a gradations of people pleasing. This guy took the top off the chart. He had 21 of the 30 items he marked a 3 or 4. That's pretty high. Usually, if I get more than half, I think I've got a pretty dyed in the wool people pleaser. And so anyway, we're asking him questions about why is he so high on people pleasing? What might have happened and I asked him the question, like, how's this affecting your life today? Oh, it gets me in trouble all the time. And he went on and on and on about all the times and things in his life that don't work because he's too much of a people pleaser. So I said, well, can you trace that back to anything in your past that might have contributed to you becoming a people pleaser, like my incident with my grandmother, for example? And he thought for a while and he said, no, I said, I don't remember anything happening that might have did anything about that. And I was about ready to go on and try something else because it didn't seem to be getting anywhere with trying to remember. And then he said, oh, wait a minute. I just remembered in 3rd grade, I was a very shy kid and my mother arranged a play date with a classmate who came over to my house and he just made fun of me and humiliated me. And I said, oh my God, there's the origin of the people pleasing right there. He got rejected. And this classmate treated him with disrespect and treated him like he was worthless. And that was the beginning of his people pleasing career. And he then withdrew more into himself, didn't have as many social contacts growing up in high school, junior high and high school. And now he's in a relationship and he's having trouble getting close.
So do you have any incidents like that in your own past, besides the one with your grandmother?
Well, I probably do. That one stands out. I'll go back and talk a little bit about where people pleasing starts, and I may share some things from my story about that. When we're born, when human beings are born, they're born with 2 basic needs, and if those needs aren't met, the rest of their life does not go well. So it's pretty important. And the two needs are the need for bonding and attachment with another human being, a secure bonding and attachment. And the other need is to have an authentic self, separate from other people, and one that you can rely on to help direct your life. And the first one, the research isn't good about that, in that only about 41% of infants in this country leave infancy with a secure attachment. They have three insecure attachments that they have one of three. One of them is an avoidant one. I didn't have that one. An anxious ambivalent one, which I had a little bit of, but the third one was a disorganized attachment, which the person devotes a lot of time focusing on the needs of others. And it's sort of a self-protective mechanism. If I can anticipate what their needs are and I can provide them, I will get along well with them, and it protects me from being rejected.
And they'll like me.
They won't like me.
Yeah.
So that early time, I mean, I did not have a secure attachment with my mother. She was crazy, unfortunately. And she tried to drown me when I was 8 weeks old. When I was born, she cried out, "This is not my baby, he's ugly." And then she'd repeat that story every time someone she knew was pregnant in my presence. So I grew up hearing the story about how ugly I was over and over again. That really affected me. It really affected my whole life. And I thought, I have to be a people pleaser because I'm ugly. People won't want to be with me unless I go out of my way to please them. And that obviously I realized at some point later in my adolescence and early 20s that was not true. I was not ugly, but it kept me from dating much during high school. I thought, well, no one's going to want to go out with me. I'm ugly. And so that affected my whole life. And I have to say, it really took me a long time to understand it and to get past it enough that I can even talk about it now.
Well, it's so interesting how something like that in your past can affect your entire life, and parents particularly when they say something, even occasionally. My mother said to me one time, "I look better with glasses on than without glasses."
Uh,
So I mean, this stays with you for your entire life, and it's really hard to get past it. How do you suggest people get over that?
well, first of all, it's recognizing that people pleasing is coming from a false self. Now, the second phase, I talked about how the bonding and attachment, if that's not secure, that it causes a disruption, and it makes it more difficult to complete the second stage, which is the stage of where the child learns to become a separate, autonomous, and authentic individual. And mostly it's because in that toddler stage, the parents don't know what the needs of the child are. They're sometimes difficult to even for the child to understand, because they're caught in two different psychological dynamics during toddlerhood. One of them is all the comfort of being in my mother's lap and getting nursed and take all my needs taken care of. So now I'm out on my own, and I've got to figure out what's safe and what isn't safe in my environment, what's good for me, what isn't good for me. And so I'm busy exploring my environment. Now, parents don't often understand that. And I mean, that's basically the work of toddlers, is to understand their environment. And so that they can see themselves as separate from the dynamic of bonding and attachment. This is a separate kind of way of being in the world. Now I'm more separate than I am attached, and I have to then find ways to make that work for me, and I need support. Now, how do parents support that? Well, there's some very simple ways that parents can support that. First of all, infants and toddlers need to hear, before they were 2 years old, they need to hear the word yes 40,000 times. Now, how many people do you think got that many yeses in their life?
Not many.
Not many, no. It's that's another way to say it, is that the research that was done at UC Berkeley, no, it was at UCLA. They found that infants or toddlers, by the time they reached the age of 2, had heard the word no 20,000 times. And basically, the way you reinforce and support autonomy is you give twice as many yeses as nos. So they should have gotten 40,000 yeses, and they didn't. So that's the first thing, is parents don't know how to support the autonomy of the child. Here's an example. Junior comes home from school with his report card, and he's gotten an A in a subject, and he shows the report card to the parent. What's the parent say? What's likely the parent going to say?
Oh, probably good job.
Good job. Yeah, good job. Keep on getting those A's. That's really you're doing well. And it sounds like that's a good thing for the parent to
So
do.
their self esteem is all around having done something to earn that A and earn the approval from the parents.
The most important response a parent can give a child in that situation is, boy, you must feel really good about getting that A.
Interesting. I don't think many people even think about that.
No. So, I mean, there's an example of how a parent could support autonomy by saying, my feelings about what you did are not as important as your feelings about what you did.
Yeah, you earned it.
You earned it.
Yeah.
And I
You
mean,
did the work.
simple things like that are important supports during that toddlerhood, so that by the time, and there's a time when the toddler goes through a really an internal conflict, because they now see the potential of being separate and being autonomous, and they know so that may mean giving up some of the comfort that they had during the bonding and attachment, even if it wasn't totally secure. It was there was enough bonding and attachment there. They got it to at least the toddlerhood. If they didn't get any bonding and attachment, they would die. So it's a necessary need to have to be met at least some level. And even though only 41% get secure attachment. So at that point, the child is really going through a lot of internal struggles, and the parents don't understand that. The child will have temper tantrums, and the child will punish the temper tantrums, when in fact, mostly temper tantrums are frustration the child has about trying to make something work for them that they can't. So it's them trying to master their environment, and they get frustrated and they have a temper tantrum about it. And then the parents who don't support temper tantrums then punish them. They send them to their room or to the corner or whatever to get over it.
How should they handle it?
They should talk to the child about what they're doing, what they're feeling. When they have a temper tantrum, they should use time in, not time out. And time in means come here and sit by me until you calm down. Not go to your room and figure out why you're having such a temper tantrum, and come back and tell us. Well, the kid doesn't know. But what the parent does with time in, they say, my connection with you is not going to be broken regardless of what you say or do. I will stay.
Oh, that's powerful.
I'll stay
Very
connected.
powerful. Yeah.
And that's the kind of support that toddlers need to develop that autonomy, that sense of being able to direct our own lives. And so for 95% of adults, they're still working it out. And where do they work it out?
people please.
They people please.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So how can you tell if you're a people pleaser?
well, you have to take my self quiz. The 30 questions that are all questions that indicate people pleasing tendencies. But I mean, obviously, the most obvious reason, well, I think in terms of the first step is being aware that you're people pleasing, and that you're really coming out of a false self rather than authentic self, and to know there's a difference. Some people don't even know there's a difference. They think the false self they're living out of is the only one, it's the only game in town. So I have to make the best I can of this false self.
Well, I think, from my own experiences of having been a people pleaser, that you feel sad and lacking, like there's something lacking in your life, and you're not being yourself. You're angry at part of the
well,
time because you're not actually getting your needs met.
there's a bottom line to this. You just gave me an avenue to talk about that, and that's shame. The bottom line that anchors people pleasing and other kinds of similar behaviors, including triggering, is shame. Because we're ashamed of our behavior. We're ashamed of our reactions. We're ashamed of how we feel about ourselves. We're ashamed of how we think other people feel about ourselves. And that's what dictates. And what shame means is, I believe there must be something wrong with me. That's what shame is. Different from guilt, which is I may have done something wrong. That can be easily corrected. But shame is a bit tricky. And so I look at people, when I work with my clients, I try to help them see if they have any shame-based beliefs. And I do have a shame-based belief inventory, self-quiz, that they can then see how many. I have the 30 most common shame-based beliefs that people have. And they can then look at that and see how many they identify with. And that one, I'm going to do a separate podcast on beliefs, and then I'll make that available.
All right. No, it sounds very important.
Yeah, I mean, it is the number one on my self quiz, and so I wanted to really have time to talk about it today as we reinitiate the podcast and give people a little bit of an understanding of and I would say probably 80 to 90% of my clients are people pleasers. I mean, I had to guess what their problems are that they're bringing to me before they even tell me. If I say, "Do you think you're a people pleaser?" "Oh yeah." "Oh yeah, that one." And so then we work on very specifically on how to reclaim your own self. And by reclaiming yourself, that means you pay attention and you take seriously your own needs. And you have developed effective ways to get those needs met. Not bitching and whining about them, but asking whatever you need from the people who have it to give to you. And that step is the biggest step in getting past people pleasing. Is
Yeah,
being
it's not always that easy to do either,
not is
depending on the person that you're with.
yeah, but I mean, I think there's where you have to work.
Yeah, it's hard.
Why is it so hard for me to ask for what I want? Well, because I feel ashamed of my needs, or I feel like the other person is not going to think well of me if I have these needs.
Mhm.
I'll be classified as a needy person if I express my needs. Those are kind of
Yeah, that's a good point.
the kind of shaming beliefs that people have. Or those are examples of the kind of beliefs that anchor in shame. And so I try to help people deconstruct those early shame-based beliefs and create much more powerful and useful new beliefs that can carry them forward. I talk about very often with my clients about the old story and the new story. Now, when you grew up, that made up the old story. Yes, you have to understand the old story because it gets in the way of creating the new story. But once you know that, then you have to use that information to create your new story and write your own narrative about your life. And I have some of my clients doing that. I have one exercise that I do with clients is I have them write a letter to a friend dated a year from today when they're writing it. And to say to their friend all the things they accomplished in the last year. That's part of the news story.
That's a good idea.
And frequently people will then chunk those down into goals. And if I want to be here in a year, where do I have to be in 6 months and 3 months and 2 months and tomorrow? And so they begin to develop a life plan to build and create the news story.
That's a really good approach.
About out of time for today, but I think we covered a lot of ground, and I enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, I did as well. So hopefully to see all of you next time. We'll have the podcast up.
And next time I'm going to dig into some more of these different ways that you could become more authentic. And I'm going to look at for one of the ways, I'm going to look at the drama triangle, which is a big one. And
yes, that certainly is. And people don't even realize that they're in the drama triangle until you describe it to them and they can see, aha, I can see what I'm doing now.
Right. Yeah. So that's ahead for next episode next month.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you then.
Okay.
Therapy turned my life around. I was able to face my fears, identify some of the beliefs that were holding me back, and start actually living my life. If Dr. Berry's latest book, What is Your PsyQ, had been available, I would have had a better understanding about myself before I saw my therapist. Or I may not have needed therapy at all. I recommend this book if you'd like to identify and rethink the past beliefs that are affecting your life. His book is available at cicrcl.org. Don't forget to subscribe to Dr. Berry's podcast and receive self-assessment tools. This is Sierra Dahl and Dr. Berry. We're looking forward to seeing you next time.